Greetings, everyone. Mark Garang here, and today my guest is George Epstein, our twice-a-month columnist, and one of our favorite guests. George, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Good.
Enjoyed my last one with you.
You did.
Yes.
You know, and we won't tell everybody that it was only 5 minutes ago. Okay. We're doing 2 shows back to back here because George is such an incredible guest. Let's not talk about presidential politics.
Fair
okay.
enough.
All right. Let's talk about school, like local stuff. We're looking for a school, a new superintendent.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think you have a pretty good search committee. I think you have, and I believe you're on that search committee, so I'm buttering you up here a little bit, but I think you have an awful wide range of goals in the community, and by the community I would include all of certainly SAU 9 and arguably SAU 13. There are different priorities, and it's not obvious to me that there will be a clear consensus about the characteristics you're looking for. The business characteristics, the ability to manage a $40 million budget, to manage perhaps significant facility expenditures, and at least significant facility adjustments, to deal with fluctuating enrollments, potentially significant changes if there are realignments of where students are attending, what schools they're attending. And then you have the whole issue of test scores, the degree to which they're a priority and concerns about those test scores and the overall quality.
What can a superintendent do?
I
mean, first of all, what do you think about the SAU? I mean, we got the contract coming up, right, for the sending schools in 2 years, I think it is. Yeah. And then, and I don't know about Madison, you're from Madison. Do you know, or are you interested in whether they're going to go to look at other alternatives? Because I think Tamworth may go to Moultonborough, Freedom may join that train.
Yeah, Madison so far has not taken any strong position or started any particular process to really do some exploration outside of Kennett High School and Kennett Middle School, because we send our kids to both. So no, I don't see a lot happening that way, but those are really on the table. Moultonborough is desperate for students. They've got all this money from all the taxes property on the lake, and they don't have any kids. And they're trying to provide a great K through 12 program with, I won't say unlimited money, but with a whole pile of money. And they feel like they need more kids in order to have the variety of experiences that they want in their school and to offer as much stuff.
What is the Moultonborough School? What is it?
It's a K through 12.
Okay.
I'm
it's
trying
not, to... I should know this. I should know the name of the school, but I don't.
Oh, Moultonborough Academy it's called.
Okay.
It's
that's
called
a regular
Academy, but it's a regular public high school.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
And elementary school. I'm trying to remember the numbers. I think they're in the 200s, K through 12.
So do you think
maybe more than that?
Do you think Tamworth is looking at it from a financial point of view to move there, or academic point of view based on our low scores, or some combination?
Well, I guess that's my point. I think there would be people in Tamworth who would say, gee, financially, we might come out with a big win here. There'd be people in Tamworth who'd say, gee, we might really get an improved education here. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who would like to see both occur. It's a real possibility, and the transportation issues are, of course, less for Tamworth than for any of the other communities in the area. So honestly, I'd be surprised if it wasn't a very interesting alternative for Tamworth. One of the questions will be for the people of Moultonborough, how much are they willing to pay? And by willing to pay, I mean, are they willing to enable Tamworth to drive down their expenses as significantly as Moultonborough is able to, even though Tamworth doesn't have the tax base? In other words, will they charge a very low per pupil rate to attract the students from Tamworth to go there, or will they say, gee, we're spending $20,000 whatever in Moultonborough to educate our kids, you're going to have to pay the same $20,000, in which case Tamworth probably won't do it, because Moultonborough is able to spend so much per student because the tax rate can be so low because they have such valuable real estate. So I look at the change up in Bartlett. You had Joe Yana is stepping down as principal, a terrific principal up there. But I think there were and are competing priorities in terms of how people want the school there to operate. And superintendents can convey that message to principals and can provide guidance for where the school or could or should be going.
Now you were a UNH trustee, right?
I was 12
Right.
years. Yep.
Okay, so you chose the chancellor, I'm sure.
Chancellor and then college presidents.
Okay,
And so you have a different situation. Chancellor wasn't the same kind of a boss that a superintendent of schools is. But yeah, you had an overall oversight person. The chancellor was a business guy to a significant degree. We had different chancellors, and one was much more educationally involved, and another was much more financial management oriented.
How much do you think a superintendent, if it's the cabinet and an administration in Washington, you're defense secretary, you expect that person just to want everything, right?
Yeah.
And then it's up to Congress to decide how much to spend, right? Basically. I mean, just fundamentally,
Fair enough.
right?
Yeah, they're advocates.
But
That's
with
true.
a superintendent, in Conway in particular, we don't have a city council looking over that budget. Now we have the electorate to decide, which in the last forever, nobody ever cuts a budget because we tend to get people who are interested in school voting for it. So I guess where I'm going with this is that do you think how much responsibility should a superintendent have in terms of the budget and not just being an advocate? Because when I hear these things, and Kevin does it too, and I have a lot of respect for Kevin and Richard, and it's a needs budget, needs-based budget. It's like, well, we can need everything.
You're absolutely right that the superintendent needs to be more of a middle ground individual, someone who's going to take into consideration the priorities of the budget committee and the school board and the taxpayer, in addition to taking into consideration all of the educational factors that could be positively influenced. So I think the superintendent has to be a politically savvy individual. Carl Nelson probably is the model for that kind of an individual. And that kind of person is going to be able to actually get more stuff done more efficiently, be able to have a higher impact on education if you've got the community behind it. You don't have everybody taking shots at the tax rate, at the expenditures that seem questionable, and so on. And so I think it's absolutely the case that an SAU 9 needs somebody who knows how to manage a $40 million budget. And that's not something you learn in your graduate education class particularly. That's something that's hard to
So I
do.
am on the search committee, and tomorrow we're actually meeting. We have a handful of resumes. I'm not telling anything out of school, so to speak. And so we're going through those now and making recommendations. Help me, what qualities should we be looking for in a superintendent? Someone who's been a superintendent? Because you're one or the other. Either you've been a superintendent, so why are you coming here? You're an assistant superintendent, so you want to move up in the world, but then that person doesn't have the experience. So it's like trying to find a president. It's very difficult to find someone in that perfect little niche.
Well, you're not going to find somebody who knows everything and has all the skills for every aspect of the job. So what you are looking for is a team. You're looking for the SAU's chief financial officer, the superintendent of schools, and the assistant superintendent of schools for curriculum. You're looking for the three of them to have the right combination and the right mix. And ideally, you have a superintendent who is not an expert on all aspects financially, not necessarily an expert on all aspects curriculum-wise, but someone who has experience in both those areas and can ask questions of the experts, the chief financial officer and the curriculum expert. So you do want someone with a broad general knowledge base. Saying, I want a business person and only a business person, that's silly. You shouldn't be running an organization that has a mission of delivering education have that person be someone who doesn't know much about education. I disagree with that, and I certainly disagree with thinking that you can pluck a great school teacher or even a great principal out of a school and say, congratulations, you're our superintendent, and oh, by the way, here's $40 million you have to keep track of. You've got to find some combination, and I don't think it's that difficult.
Part of it's the pay.
Well, you and I have had this discussion a little bit in the past. A mid-six-figure pay amount is good pay. And you can say, gee, it's a $40 million organization, and if it were private enterprise, that might be a $500,000 a year kind of a job, and it won't be ever a $500,000 a year kind of job. But if you have the right person and you have the right financial incentives, in addition to a base salary, in my humble opinion, you have a set aside of a significant amount, whether it's $30,000 or $80,000, and say, you have an opportunity to earn this additional money if you hit certain criteria. Financial criteria, test score criteria, absenteeism criteria. You guys, not so much you, but the SAU board would have to set that criteria. But I would love to see an opportunity for a really successful superintendent to be able to earn a kicker, a nice bonus.
Well, you were a teacher.
I was.
And you're a trustee of UNH and a very successful business guy. Do you mind if I put your name in tomorrow?
I can't imagine anyone who'd be better than I was. And you didn't mention 37-year school moderator in Madison.
Yes.
So you've got to become quite the expert to be. So
that's a yes. I'm here. I'm not hearing a no here, George.
But the point is, there are people like that who aren't as elderly as I am, who are potential candidates for this position, who would be non-traditional people.
But you have to be credited. You have to have accreditation, though, right?
Well,
a certificate, I guess.
You do, but the state of New Hampshire, and particularly under the current libertarian leadership of the State Department of Education, they're pretty good about granting conditional waivers for some period of time and giving people the opportunity to get whatever they need in order to qualify for that certification. So, for example, I finished my master's degree in business, but I started and didn't finish a master's degree in education. It may be that I'd have to take a few additional courses in order to satisfy that particular requirement. So I think there's some flexibility there. The trick, and I ran 2 of the presidential searches for the university system, one for Keene State College, one for Granite State College, and then I was very much involved in the search for a chancellor. The search consultant you have has to bring your broad-mindedness, and by yours I mean the committee's broad-mindedness, to the search, and to be willing to look out and actually search for non-traditional candidates. And you're using...
We did not.
You're not using any?
No headhunters. No headhunters. Basically, we advertise, the school advertised in the professional associations and that, so it's obviously limiting to people who are in the system.
Very limiting. So you've made a decision to really limit who you're going to look at.
I didn't. That was the SAU board. But yes, I mean, it wasn't.
But you're a search committee.
Yeah, but we only get we've only met twice, and here it is. Here's your applicants. That's
all
right.
right. So I'll be a jerk about it a little bit, which is appropriate for my personality. I wouldn't serve on a search committee where I couldn't, as a search committee, decide how I was going to recruit potential applicants. I mean, why would you serve on a search committee where you're being fed this limited group of very canned folks coming out of the professional journals? If I wanted to have a broader range of options for my superintendent of schools, I would go out and do some advertising and say, gee, I want to look in the Union Leader, or I want to look in New Hampshire Business Today, or I want, a broader representative group to submit resumes. I'd go out and find those, and I'd do some recruiting of them. I would probably want to hire
a headhunter.
A headhunter. a skilled headhunter, someone who understands education and so on. So, that would be attractive to me. But if I couldn't, if they said, gee, I won't give you a budget for that, I'd still want my advertising budget to be applied to a broader array of
Well, they
media.
did do, I mean, one thing is that the SAU, because I asked that. I said, what about LinkedIn? What about this? What about that, right?
Yeah.
And now I didn't do it preemptively like you're suggesting. I was just happy to be on the committee, you know. But they said they nixed the idea of doing the headhunting because it cost like $40,000, and they talked to a few people and it didn't work. Whatever, you know, I just don't.
Well, it depends on the headhunter, and that absolutely is true. I had one really crummy headhunter, I had one really good one. But if you're looking for alternatives from assistant superintendents or people who are already superintendents somewhere and who are very much from that small pool of talent with that particular mix of skills, you want to go beyond it, you got to go beyond it. And LinkedIn, Indeed, and all the rest.
I've got a good story. I can't tell you that because it's about how I went and searched for on my own. So what I did was, and I'm saying this isn't going to be live till tomorrow, but what I did is I just Googled the 10 top just superintendents who got awards, school systems are doing really well, and I literally emailed 10 to 15 superintendents around the country, and I said, if you know anybody thinking that they might be interested.
Great idea.
And I got a couple responses.
Great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. It's not that hard to broaden the range of people you're searching for, but the committee has to come together and say, gee, these are really the kind of characteristics we want to prioritize, and then you want to check and make sure that you're in sync with the SAU board, because you can waste an awful lot of time finding your perfect candidate, bring them to the SAU board, and they say, well, we don't want to hire this person. Yeah. So yeah, you've got an interesting challenge ahead of you. I think money's a factor, but the breadth of the search is an important part of the process.
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave that alone. Just to get granular a little bit about the Conway school system, there are a lot of ideas. I mean, the school board voted to close a school a couple days ago. That hasn't been determined which one or which year and that kind of stuff. But one of the other ideas is to combine the 7th through 12th in the high school. What do you think about combining all that? What do you think about that?
I taught at Kennett when the school was on double sessions for 6 years. And the high school, 9 through 12, went in the morning, the 7th and 8th grade went in the afternoon. So you shared the building, the kids were there, overlapping times, they bumped into each other and so on. The right facility designed for a reasonable level of segregation between the younger kids and the older kids, that can work. That's not an unreasonable thing to do. That's what Moulton Borough Academy does because they have so few kids. But I think the Kennett facility is not particularly, the new one is not particularly well designed to do that.
You mean because it looks like a prison?
I'm not going to do architectural stuff with you. That would be a whole other array of issues.
Kidding.
But it's not organized in a way that is designed to segregate the ages particularly.
But they do. I think they separate the 9th grade and that kind of stuff.
But you'd want to continue doing that. I think if you wandered around the building, you'd have a tricky time finding that place where the 7th and 8th graders should be. That kind of thing. So I think there's some challenges associated with that. But in the end, it has to come down to the numbers, how many kids you have, and the square footage in the facility and so on. You can look at it from that perspective. I don't think there's anything educationally horrible or socially horrible about having 7th graders in the same big building with 12th graders. I mean, it's not an awful thing.
Okay, now Conway just did
3rd graders and 8th graders, I have more of a problem with that.
And it makes sense. Okay, so we just had our reval in Conway, right? And it shifted the tax burden from commercial to residential property owners. Is there any, and of course, most of the tax dollars goes to education. Yeah. I mean, outside of a broad-based tax, and I have to admit, I know not even the Democrats even advocate a broad-based tax anymore, but I've always been an advocate, and I'll probably, lose subscribers, of a sales tax. That to me seems the most progressive. If you don't include food and clothing and a bunch of stuff, that seems to be like the most progressive type of tax.
Well, it's not a progressive tax. Well, it's not. I mean, the lower income person is going to pay a higher proportion of of their income in taxes than the high income person because they have to buy stuff.
No, but if you exclude that stuff,
Well, but
I mean, it gets a little, okay.
yeah, but most people in most states, you do the computation, and the most well-off people do well under a sales tax priority state. But you're
But this
right.
is a property. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the property owners, that's a very regressive because everybody owns a home.
So I have a different, slightly different view there, and this is when Democrats used to propose income taxes to reduce property taxes, where I had a problem with it. The house is an asset, and it's a big and highly valuable asset at this point in time. And the young family that's just bought the house and has the big mortgage and has but has real income coming in. They have young people with growing incomes and so on. They're going to get clobbered worse by an income tax, the young family, than the old family, because the older family has paid off the house. They may have much lower income at that point, but they don't have the mortgage. They can do pretty well in a situation and be very happy with an income tax. But the young family that's struggling and trying to save money for the kids and all the rest of it to go to college, and they're the ones who suffer the most under an income tax. So
I'm not an advocate of income tax, by the way.
and so a sales tax is a bit of a balance there, and is not a crazy thing to do. The attraction of a sales tax in New Hampshire, as in Florida, for example, is that out-of-state people pay a hunk of it, a significant hunk of it. And so the opposition to the sales tax in New Hampshire, which came pretty close to passing under Jeanne Shaheen's governorship. I'm trying to remember if one of the parts of the legislature passed it or not, but it came very close to passing, and she actually said sort of quietly, okay, I'll go along with it if you guys pass it. But it was defeated, and it was defeated by the retail store owners along the borders, and by the outlet owners and so on that we have around here. They fought it tooth and nail because they attract a lot of business that they wouldn't otherwise attract because of the lack of a sales tax here. So, people talk about taxes. They're saying, well, this tax would be fairer than that tax. The fairest tax is the one that you pay and that I don't. And I think that's what an awful lot of this boils down to. There will be winners and losers with any change to our tax structure, and it's not, there's no right and wrong to it. You have to decide who you want the winners and losers.
You think this current system is more right than in instituting a sales tax?
No, I'm saying you can't make that determination. There will be people who will win under the current situation and lose under a sales tax.
So if you could wave a magic wand, what would you do?
I wouldn't have any particular priority one way or the other to change anything. I wouldn't go out and start pounding on doors and saying what we really need to do is such and such. It's just not obvious to me that you have a winner or a loser or a real improvement over some significant change. The federal tax system, we could start another half hour and do that sometime, which is Looney Tunes. And there's insanity built into that. What New Hampshire has as a state tax system is a tax system that has evolved over time, that has some sort of balance between winners and losers. It doesn't punish enormously anybody disproportionately, and it doesn't reward anybody disproportionately. It's what we have, and there's no specific thing I would do that would broadly improve the fairness to all the people of New Hampshire. I don't have a solution.
I just think that this is a real issue with the way the property taxes have gone up so much in Conway. And you're talking about incomes and all that, but that's their primary asset for most people, whether you're in a mobile home or a duplex or a nice home on Birch Hill or something, and boy, it's just getting onerous.
It is, and so
and you can avoid buying that extra boat if you don't want to. If you don't want to pay the sales tax, or
you have to pay the tax on your house, but you'd have to pay the sales tax. You'd have to pay the income tax. The short-term good solution that I do think is a right one for New Hampshire
Exemptions?
is exemptions, that you need a homeowner, a local resident exemption that is significant, that moves the tax burden to the out-of-state owner, to the STR owner, and reduces the burden on the local taxpayer. That's the obvious thing to do, and it should be significant. I think that given the way the prices have gone up, it wouldn't be unreasonable to have a full $100,000 exemption for a year-round resident.
I think the David Page and some of the other reps are proposing that in the House right now, and I think what they're proposing is that if they pass that on the state level, then communities could decide for themselves what that percentage is or what that amount is.
And I guess I'm okay with that. I think that's fine. I'm always leaning towards greater local control. Just for what it's worth, one of the tricks associated with it is the New Hampshire Constitution and their use of the word proportionate, and I'm going to forget the exact language of it, but it may well be something that, when passed, could result in a ruling by the state Supreme Court that it's unconstitutional, which would mean it would require a constitutional amendment, that you can't charge somebody who is a New Hampshire resident really a different tax rate than an out-of-state person. Our Constitution is pretty tough that way. So, for example, I mentioned it in the column, but you can't have if you did have an income tax in New Hampshire, you can't have a progressive income tax. The person who makes $1 million a year has to pay the same income tax rate as the person who's making $50,000 per year. Now, you can have an exemption in that case, but you have to pay exactly the same rate. You can't have a progressive tax rate where the high income person pays 8% and the low income person pays 4%.
But other states do the homestead exemption.
They do, but they don't have the same constitution we do.
Okay, so we have a good one. Okay, speaking of STRs, I know you're not a big fan of short-term rentals, right?
That's fair.
Yeah, that's fair. So there's someone proposed, got 25 signatures, and there's a STR ordinance,
right,
which was me.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a public hearing coming up tomorrow night, which will be very interesting. Yeah. And the crux of it is that if you're allowed to rent your home for 30 calendar days, and if you go beyond a year, and if you go beyond that, you're then considered a short-term rental, and then you have to conform to some very strict state safety code. It's this designation called R1, which is like hotels. And the big test is going to be, so the realtors around town are saying, I mean, believe me, I've got many texts and phone calls about this, and some just say it's about time. Surprisingly, a number of realtors have said that because it has upended the market somewhat. It's inflated prices, and I think you've reported that 25% of our nearly 25% of our homes are registered,
including condos and everything.
Registered
that's where
STRs.
they're various, but they are deemed STRs by the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. So I don't know how many are legally registered and illegal, but yes, the number's incredible.
Yeah, and half the homes, I didn't know this, half the homes in Conway are second homeowners.
That would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me, you know, and there's so many homes.
Think how that you'd completely fix the pain that's being experienced by Conway homeowners today as a result of the reappraisal and so on. You'd fix it immediately if you gave them the kind of exemption that you were talking about, right, or you created a charges of some type that resulted in income coming from those out-of-state people or out-of-town people, right, at least. Why would the proposed warrant article not be deemed in the same category as the Freedom case that was recently determined?
Well, you're going to get in the weeds with this, and I can't speak to that exactly, but according to Chris Meyer, and Chris Meyer is the lawyer that put this together, and he worked on the Kearsarge, and he's a zoning ordinance guy. Yeah. And he says, on this particular one, like all those other ones are technical, you know, like with the Freedom case, you know, it was like the language was, you know, if it's a nuisance, but it generally is a nuisance, which meant that that house in question that they won the ruling on had to be proven to be a nuisance. And I can't explain it very carefully, but I'll just say this, and it's untested, it'll probably go to court, but Chris is he thinks he's obviously wouldn't have proposed this and helped me with this, and I didn't know that part at all. And we talked about whether to have a full ban, 30 days, and I think that there's a balance. I think that people have a right, there are property rights, and a lot of people, and the target really is the investor. It's not the regular second homeowner who's renting a few weeks a year or many weekends to help with expenses. It's the person from out of state who just buys a home for the express purpose of making it a hotel.
So I think an important point. I'm a big local control guy. I think the state is very grabby about taking power away from our towns with great frequency. The organization, because it wasn't a court that ruled on the case in Freedom, was the New Hampshire Housing Adjustment Board or something. And basically, this was a board created by the legislature and the governor to take away power from the local zoning boards and planning boards, and to provide a speedy way for developers to develop stuff and to go around local rules and requirements. It's horrible. It's a terrible situation.
But part of that reason was to go through the process quicker than having to go to Superior Court, which can take years.
Well, there's nothing to preclude Freedom now from appealing this to Superior Court, and I hope they do, because it's packed. This organization is a tool of the developers, and it's designed to approve everything and overrule towns that want to create some reasonable zoning controls. And to me, this is exactly what's wrong with our current legislature and our current governor, which is, boy, let's grab as much power as we can in Concord. Let's try to take as much power away from the towns, because we know better when we're in Concord. And so my hope is, and I don't know legally whether it's a smart move or not, but my hope is that the good taxpayers of Freedom will chip in and decide they want to appeal this, because it stinks. The whole process stinks, and the outcome, I hope, is wrong, but at the very least the process was not fair.
Okay, we're out of time again.
No, really?
Yeah, George, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I'll see you again in a month.
Okay, take care.
All right.